Okay, hi everybody. I think we'll get started. Hopefully you can see the first slide. I'm just going to run through a little bit of an introduction for today's webinar, which is on producing material passports without BIM. So we'll go from a kind of start to finish, how to import your project into Madaster using Excel. Got a couple agenda points here. So these are just the kind of different steps that we're going to be running through. So we'll look at kind of setting up your asset in Madaster, how to find and download the correct Excel template, and then we'll break down that template because it can be quite a lot to look at for the first time. So we'll look at what information is required, what's optional information, which fields should you be populating, and we'll kind of go through from a detailed upload, but we'll also look at what's the kind of the minimum amount of information that you need to get some outputs from Madaster. We'll then look at how to upload it into the platform, and then following that, the data quality checks that the platform does. So there's a process that Madaster platform does to ensure that we've got the right information. And then we'll run through a little bit of a demo of what sort of results you can get out of the platform from that, and also looking at how to generate those passports. So whilst the registration in Madaster itself is a form of passport, it might be that you want to produce reports or you want to produce a PDF export from the platform. So we'll have a look at that as well. What we're looking at here is a portfolio on the Madaster platform. So I've created a little demo area so I can show you how the Excel upload works. So the first thing you'll need to do is structure your account in such a way that you would like, and then create a new building or a new asset within that. I won't go into this in too much detail. We do have some other videos and tutorials on how to set up your account and how to set up new buildings. But essentially, within this portfolio, I can create a new building, and I can input the basic information about this building. So give it a name, decide what usage it is. So in this case, we're looking at a kind of demonstration office, less than 1,000 meters squared. I can choose the building phase. So what type of building is it? Is it a new building, a temporary building? Is it existing? Is it a renovation or a partial renovation? I've got a few people looking to join, I think. Just a second. So I'm looking at uploading information about the basic parts of this building. So this is the first stage, is to create the new building, put in the basic information, and then click save. So I've already done this just for the benefit of time. I've created a building, a basic shell, that we can then look to upload information into. With Madaster, there's two different strands. So one's the BIM model through the form of an IFC file. But as we're finding more and more often, the complexity of the BIM model is maybe not there, or maybe it's a project that doesn't have a BIM model, or you just want to get started with a project of any scale, and Excel's a good way to do that. So this is the basic information that we've inputted. If you want to adjust that, you can edit the building and it brings up this window again. So we can kind of add information as we get it, or as we kind of get to know more about the building, we can enrich this information. You can also add labels. So if your building has BREEAM scores or LEED scores, WELL scores, we can store those in here. And you can also give your energy labels, energy index, and your primary energy demand as well. And if you want, you can add buildings, that's building images, that sort of thing. So once I'm happy with my general tab, I can then move across to what we call the dossier. And the dossier is an area within the platform where we store documents. So that's input documents. So it could be your BIM file or your Excel file in this case, but it could also be a place where you store additional documents relating to the building. So I'm thinking about kind of different warranties or contracts. You might also have drawings and calculations that you want to store in the same place. So useful to understand that you can store all sorts of different documents in the dossier. And also when we're generating passports at the end of this process, this is where they will be stored. So once they're generated, they've been calculated by the platform, then this is the area that you'll find them being stored once they've been generated. So to add a new document or to upload information, we can go to the upload button here. And it brings up a new pop-up window. So it asks you, what's the file type? So I mentioned it could be a source file, but it could also be a general document. And you could add links as well. So if you want to link to a website or a web page, you can do that. In this case, we're looking for an Excel, so we'll choose source file. And then we also need to specify which classification method we're using. So the Madaster platform uses classification code to separate elements, materials, and products into different building layers. So we need to understand where the elements sit within the building so we can give insights at each of the different building layers. So you can see a little list there of the different classification codes we have available. In the UK, Uniclass is probably the most commonly used, but we do have the option to input using NRM and some of the international classification codes. So Omniclass is there. If you are using a different one, so we have some Dutch ones and German ones, then it's worthwhile getting in touch with us because we do have more available. These are the ones that are currently being made available to the UK part of the platform. So for the base of this, I'll choose Uniclass, and you can see once I choose my classification method, then the Excel template appears. And the reason for this is because each of the different templates have a slightly different classification structure. So the templates change depending on which classification code you choose. So I choose my Uniclass code. I can then download the template and go straight to my downloads. The second half of this I'll cover when we actually come to upload the document, but for now we can leave it there. And I will switch across to the Excel sheet. As I mentioned at the start, it's a little bit intimidating potentially when you first come on here, but this is this quick start guide at the start. The first page here is aimed to explain it in a little bit more detail and try and give you an indication of which areas of the template you need to infill and the level of detail that you need. So the first thing to mention is you'll notice there's a few different tabs along the bottom here, and they correspond to these tabs that are described at the top. And these are the different phases that Madaster can interpret or take into the platform. So you can infill information for all of these different phases collectively. So if you were doing a full project and you wanted to catalog the demolished elements, the preserved elements, you could also list your construction waste, and you could also specify the new materials that are going into the building. Might be that you only want to do one of these or a combination of these depending on your project type. For this demo, I've only infilled new materials, so we're assuming that this is a brand new project, and we're not doing any demolition and we're not preserving anything from the previous design. The second half of this first quick start page is the different fields of information that we can infill in each of these tabs, and it gives you a little bit of an indication of what they are. And I'll give a bit of a brief description of what each one is and why it's useful for us. You can see that some of these are optional, and the ones in bold are the ones that are mandatory, or the minimum level information that we need for each element to bring into Madaster. So starting at the top, if you have the information, a GTIN code for a product is a really great way of matching directly to an environmental product within Madaster. Some of you may already be familiar with the process that Madaster uses. Essentially, what we try to do is we specify elements, materials, and products in a source file like this, bring it into the Madaster platform where we try and connect it to environmental data. So we have digital versions of products and materials on the platform in a whole range of databases. Could be generic products, but also manufacturers' products, specific products. And we're trying to do a match. So we're trying to automatically connect the products and materials you're specifying to those data sets. And there's a number of different ways that we can do those matching. And like I say, the GTIN is a really great one because it's a one-to-one code unique to that product. So if it's being specified by the manufacturer and we specify it in our Excel sheet, then the platform knows to make a one-to-one match there. Obviously, that's not going to be the case for a lot of projects. It's unlikely that you'll know all the GTIN codes or that you're specifying them within your specification documents. But useful to understand that Madaster can use that as a way to match. And that's the same for B, which is the manufacturer's article number. Again, this is another unique code for the product or the manufacturer that we can use to match on. C and D are different codes that we provide within the platform. So each product or material registration that I mentioned with environmental data connected has its own code. If you wanted to, you could browse the Madaster platform, see the product that you want to connect to, take that code and input it into this Excel sheet. And again, that would give you a one-to-one match. So that's a really useful way of ensuring you get the correct product or material. Optional here, you can add a description or a type name for the element. And then we're into the information that's required. So this is the essential information that we require. And this is the same information that we also need from a BIM model as well. So essentially the information is the same. We're bringing it in a slightly different format. So that is a material or product name assignment. So we need to know what the material is or what's it made out of. We need to know if it's a product, then what's the name of that product. And then we also need the classification code that I mentioned. So we specified uniclass when we chose this Excel template. So we need to specify a uniclass code that corresponds with the product type or the material type. We can provide the floor on which the material is located, the number of elements, and the geometry. So depending on what type of product it is, you might need to give slightly different quantities here. We're not expecting to have area, length, volume, and weight, and thickness, and height, and width of every single thing that you're adding. But useful to understand that what we're trying to do is calculate the mass of that element. So where similarly with EPDs, where we have a designated material quantity, so something could be done by cubic meter, then we need the appropriate dimensions to help scale that product up, if that makes sense. So we need geometric information, and if it's a product that's defined by quantity, then we need the quantity. So if it's nails or something like that, or screws, if you want to go to that level of detail, then that would be a quantity-based product. So we need to know how many. And you can see when it's empty, it's considered to be only one. The second half of this, again, is optional. So it might be that we require thickness and height and width in order to calculate mass, in which case you should provide that information. And then the second half of this is to do with detachability. So we have a methodology on Madaster that calculates how detachable an element is or a product is. And that's something that you can specify within this Excel sheet. And we can have a look at that in a little bit more detail when we switch across to the new materials tab that we'll be infilling. We can also add percentage of reuse, how much percent is available for reuse. There's all sorts of optional information that we can add to kind of enrich this information and tell the platform a little bit more about the materials that we're specifying. If I switch across to the new materials tab, so we're adding new products and materials, you can see that the fields that we were looking at here are now run along the top. And I've already pre-infilled a number of materials and products here for this project. At this point, I've only infilled the mandatory information, so I just wanted to show you, what's the minimum level of information you can provide. So I've started with the description. I've given a material product assignment, and then I've given a classification code from the drop down of classification codes here. There's also, depending on which classification structure you've chosen, there's a full breakdown of the classification codes on the last tab or the second last tab, where you can see the full Uniclass coding structure. At the moment, we have systems and elements codes from Uniclass, so quite high level codes. You don't need to go into the detail of products at the moment. And I recommend, if you want to have a better, if you want to use a search, then the Uniclass website is really good for that. So you can search products and materials, and it'll give you the code that you need for that element. So I've infilled that, and then the classification gets infilled automatically depending on the code that you choose. I've got the floor assignment here, so a lot of them on the ground floor, and then a few things on the first and second floors. Then I've got the geometric information, so you can see that these kind of vary. So depending on what product it is, we have slightly different geometric information, which I've infilled for each of the elements. And the final thing I want to mention is the detachability information. So this is additional to what's required, but I just wanted to break it down and show you, it's quite easy to specify this information, and it'll give you some quite interesting insights into how removable something is. So it asks for a number of different pieces of information about the product. What's the connection type, and you can choose from a drop down what type of connection it is, whether it's a dry connection, is it magnetic, are there added elements, is it a chemical join, and essentially we're using this information to determine how detachable something is. It asks you where the connection is, so how accessible the connections are, whether there's any overlaps of different elements, and how easy it is to remove it or to get into those products and materials. Excuse me. And that's the basis of the information that I've filled in. I've done that for 24 different products at the moment, but you can there's no limit on the number of materials and products you can add in here. And I just want to mention one final thing before we switch across back to the platform to upload this information. You can see for the last two here, I've given them a Madaster ID, and this will be important to remember when we come back to the platform. I'll show you where to find that ID. So these are two products that I wanted to have very specific registrations for. I wanted to match to the exact product and material I wanted within the platform. And this was a good way of ensuring that. So I've taken these codes from the platform, and they'll match automatically when we bring it in. So if I stop sharing here and I bring up the platform again, so now we want to upload, and it'll bring up the pop-up that we already had a little look at. So we're looking at a source file, so an Excel. We infilled our Excel sheet with Uniclass. We then select our file from our browser. This will bring up your file browser. We can select it. And then on the second half of this sheet, we have the databases. So I gave a little bit of a brief overview of how the Madaster platform works and what we're trying to do. And these are the different databases that we can search within for environmental information. You can see by default the generic database has been selected, as well as my account's specific database. So whenever you set up an account in Madaster, you also get a database that comes along with it that you can add your own materials and products to. Excuse me. And these are selected by default. I can adjust these around. So if I wanted to look in my own database first, and then infill any gaps with the generic information, then we can tell the platform which way I want to look, which database I want to look in first. You can add additional databases. So these are another additional verified databases that we have. So verified database sources. You can see we have ICE, which is carbon data in the UK, and we also have EBU and Okabaudat, which are European EPD databases, and the BRE there as well. There's also all sorts of different manufacturer databases that we can connect to. And if you'd like more information on the databases we have available, then I'll provide some information on that at the end. So once I'm happy with the selections made, for the purposes of this, we're using the generic data because we have circularity information inbuilt into that, so we can get some circularity scores on the different materials and products we're bringing in. And I've already input this file just to save a little bit of time. So here's one I prepared earlier. And if I click through into this file, we can see that this is what I meant by the data quality, the quality check. So the first thing the platform does is it looks for the information, so the mandatory information that I mentioned, and it gives you a score back to say, this is how much I've managed to find, this is how much there is in the gap. And on the right-hand side, we have the percentage of the number of elements that we've managed to successfully link, and the amount of mass we've managed to calculate from the linked products and materials. So just to touch on those again, we've got the classification methods, we've got a material assignment for 91% of these products and materials, and we've got geometric dimension. The gap here might be because my material naming was slightly off, so we haven't received a direct match. It might be because there's a gap in the material naming I put on the Excel sheet. So this gives me an opportunity to review that, whether I want to do that in Excel. Maybe it's also something I can just I can do manually in the platform. So if we're reaching kind of percentages of around 80%, then there's a good chance we can do the enrichment in the platform, just to get it up to that final 100% or as close to as we can. And this is a good score here, so you can see that the elements without geometric dimensions is 0. So I've got geometric information for everything. And at the moment, those are mostly split between volume and area information. To have a look at these, to have a look at the file in more detail, we can look at the enrich. By selecting automatic here, we can go through the matching process again. So if you wanted to add more databases, or you wanted to remove databases and recalculate it and go through the matching process again, then I could adjust the databases here, and it would enrich automatically. In this case, what we want to do is enrich manually. So we want to look at all the elements that we have, and review the connections that are made. So on the left-hand side here, we have the elements that I specified in the Excel sheet. I then have in the middle column the material that I assigned within the Excel sheet. And on the right-hand side, we have the products and materials that I've managed to automatically link to within the generic database that I chose. There's a few things we can do within here, so we might want to just double check that we've got the correct information associated. You can see that this laminated timber has matched with solid structural timber. Maybe we want to have a look at this one and connect it to a different data source, and we can do that by selecting the element, and this menu down the bottom pops up. So we've got the link icon here that allows us to link to different products and materials. We've got an edit button here, so the pencil allows you to edit the information, so we can change the phase, so we can flick between the different tabs we have on the Excel sheet. We can say, okay, this is demolished material actually, it's being removed from the building, or we can say, this is actually a preserved element that already existed here. We can also adjust our classification structure, or classification code rather. I can't change the structure at this point. So we could change, if this came through incorrectly, then we could adjust it. The cross-laminated timber wall system seems correct. We could give it specific lifespan. So if we knew exactly how long the lifespan of this product was, and it was different to the defined lifespan given by the product that we're connected to, then we could adjust that. And the same with the input information. So if we knew this was a reused product, we could give specific information on that as well. And now you can see the detachability information that we inputted on the Excel sheet that's come through. And it also gives you a user interface here that you can adjust that So we've got the different connection types, the detail, how accessible it is. So these are, again, relating to the drop downs that we had in the Excel sheet. But if I wanted to link this to a different product, then I could go to the link button here. And what this would do is it will pull up my database browser. So we chose the Apaea generic database when we were inputting, so that's selected by default, and it automatically chooses products and materials that have the associated geometric information. So this is a volume and quantity based product. I could have a look in here and say cross laminated. Um, you can see within this database there is actually a cross laminated timber as well as a structural timber. So I can say actually this is the one that I want to link to. And if you wanted to have more information on this product, then we can use this little drop down to see, okay, this is slightly different. This has got a slightly longer lifespan. We've got the description here of where the data's come from, the density of this product or material. And you can see that we also have the Madaster identifier here. So if I wanted to take a note of this and ensure that this material registration is connected to all the time when I'm inputting information, then I can take this code and put it into the Excel sheet and I'll get a one-to-one match next time. I can also view this data in more detail. So by going through into this next tab, it allows you to see even more information about this product material. So we've got circularity information here. Does this align with what I'm expecting? We've got in this case, this is a generic one, but we have the EPD information here. Does this align with my thinking? And the other three tabs well, we can see the search criteria here. So if I specify this name in the material assignment, then I'll automatically connect to this product again. So this is the sort of thing that we're aiming to connect to. So this product registration has all the information that we need to then calculate things like to do LCA analysis, to do circularity information on the whole building. Each product and material we connect to has this sort of information combined within it. So this is the one I want. I want to link to this one, so I can say, okay, I want to go up to this top hand corner, and I want to link. And then it asks me whether I want to link just to this element or all unlinked elements with the material laminated timber. I could add the laminated timber as a search criteria for the building. So this will mean that in future, if I upload another Excel, then laminated timber will be on the search criteria, so it'll automatically connect again. So you can teach the platform a little bit. We could also do it by the type name. So this is the element name. We could say, okay, if it has the type name CLT, then I also want to connect to it. So there's lots of different ways that you can kind of teach the platform to match slightly better the next time. So if you're doing multiple uploads, or you have your own naming structure for materials and products, then useful to understand that we can adjust the platform to kind of reflect your processes. For this one, I'll just say I just want to connect to this particular product. So I click OK. And now you can see that this CLT laminated timber has switched across. So it's a cross laminated timber now. And if I look at this, this is the registration that I wanted. So you can also see that we have an enrichment of 100%. It might be that when you bring an Excel sheet in, then it's lower than that. And I suspect that'll likely be down to the way that you're naming your materials. So it might not be a one-to-one match. You might not include your concrete breakdown, for example, or you might have slightly different naming. So we can always review that, adjust it slightly and re-upload, or we can also do what I'm doing now, which is a slightly manual linking for the ones that haven't automatically connected. We can filter these as well. So if there's unlinked items, we can filter exclusively by the unlinked ones and focus on them. And we can also break it down by where the elements are. So if we want to focus on the structure, for example. So there's all sorts of different ways that you can filter and allow you to manually adjust the information that we put into the Excel sheet. So we'll say we're happy with that. Once we're happy, we can back out of this check. And the Excel sheet is here. You can see that at the moment it's not been activated, but now that I'm happy with the matching, I'm happy with the products and materials we've assigned, I can go ahead and activate this information. It's got a little pop-up here to say that I'm using a manufacturer product. Do I want to share information back to the manufacturer to let them know that I've used that product? I don't want to share it in this case, so I'll just say don't share data with the manufacturer, and I can hit OK. We'll get a little pop-up to say that the information's being calculated. And hopefully, because it's not a massive file, we should have a result within a few seconds. Yep, so now once the calculations are complete, I get a little notification at the bell to say your building calculation is ready. You can see the results in the performance tab. So great. Let's go to the performance tab. And you can see now that where previously I only had the general tab and the dossier, I also have these new KPIs along the top. So this is the information that we're aiming for. This is the information that we want to get from inputting the information. So the first thing we can look at here is an overview of all those KPIs. So we have, this is like a dashboard that's customizable. And we'll come back to this and I'll show you how to customize it so you can adjust it slightly. We'll start with the mass tab. So you can see that because we've given classification codes to each of our elements, it's managed to separate the elements across the building layers. And we can see, where the majority of our material buildup is across these layers. You can see, let's have a look at the structure. We've got concrete elements in there. We've also got a precast slab. We can drill down into more detail. We can say, this is the file that it's come from. We've got ID, we've got the name of the product, and then we've also got quantity information, the classification code. So you can get really quite granular quite quickly, delve into the individual elements. Like I say, we can see this is about 319 tons of material. We've also got it by meters squared. And this little overview just tells us, if there's any elements that are unknown. So if you do calculate an input file with elements that don't have a good link or that haven't been linked properly, then this will give you a little bit of a heads up to say, some of the information you're seeing here might not be fully accurate in terms of the full project. So you might want to go back at that point and see what those elements are. Maybe they're elements that you could take out or exclude from the calculations, or maybe it's also worthwhile doing a little bit of extra work just to ensure that we've got all of the information we need. We can have a look at this information in different ways. So we can do it by building layer. It'll also give you the materials. So we can see quite a lot of this project, this demo project is in the structure. We can do it by material family as well. So it'll give you the breakdown of what the majority of the material is. You can see that 100 tons almost is coming from the structure. In the precast, so both of these will be concrete, 160 tons-ish of concrete in this. And then we've got the metal as well, so we can click in, and again, it'll let you drill down into what those elements are. So these are steel elements, it looks like reinforced steel parts. I can move along to the next tab, which is our circularity information. So we had a look at that cross-laminated timber on a product level. So that was specific to that individual element. This is now aggregated all the information, so all that circularity information for the entire building. So we have the input, for the materials and products, and also the output. So what's gone into the materials and products? Are they reused? Have they been repurposed? Um, then is it non-renewables? This information has come from the information that we have already in Madaster. So those generic products that we link to have this information, and we've combined it together. We also can see the output scenario for the materials that I've chosen. See quite a lot of available for downcycling. Imagine that's the concrete that we were talking about largely. And then we also have what's available for recycling. We don't have anything that's been specified as available for reuse at this point. We might have something that's we know is going to be reused, in which case we could specify that information. We could adjust that information to reflect that the individual cases. If you want to have more information on how our circularity methodology works, we do have quite a lot of documentation on it on our documents page. So feel free to drop me an email if you'd like more information on that, or you want to have a discussion about it separately. But there is an opportunity here to look at the Madaster platform, the circularity score in more detail. It's something that we've based upon, or we've taken our calculation from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. So that's kind of the basis of what we use it for. We've adjusted it slightly. But essentially what it is it's a ratio of the construction phase. So what are they virgin materials? Are they reused materials? Are they recycled materials? Combined with the ratio of the end of life scenario. So are they going to refill, landfill? Are they going to incineration, energy recovery? Are they available for reuse? And the combination of these two ratios give us the overall circularity index building score. And then you can drill down to these into even more detail, and you can get really granular with the information per layer, per recycled materials by mass. So you can get really detailed quite quickly. Just back out of this. And again, similar to the mass, there's all sorts of different ways that we can view this information. So we can do it by material and product as well. This will give you quite clear information on, what are the highest contributing materials and products. We've got our environmental tab here now. So we have some slightly different compliances. By default in the UK, we've got the RICS Whole Life Carbon Assessment version 2 standard that we can apply. So it's calculating whole life carbon. We can also adjust it to reflect slightly different metrics. And we can adjust our phases here. So if we're reporting on slightly different phases, maybe we want to do A1 to A3 sequestered carbon, for example. We could select that and it would give us our sequestered carbon score for the elements that we brought in, excuse me. And we can see them across the whole life cycle, so we can break it down. And again, there's all sorts of different ways that we can view this information. Last tab I'll show you at this stage is just the financial tab. So each element that we've connected to also is connected to a financial data set, and that allows us to give an indication of what the material value is towards the end of the building's life. So this building, if I look at the general tab quickly, has an expected lifespan of 50 years. So our calculations estimating that in 50 years' time, the materials that I've specified in the Excel sheet will be worth around 44,000 euros. And you can see our per meter squared there as well. And again, you can drill down into more information. So if we pick an individual material type, something like metal might be interesting because it's probably where the most value is, I suspect. If we look at some of the reinforced steel, we've got information on the historic price of steel. The trend analysis is the dotted one. So we do a little bit of trend of which way the steel price is going. And then we also have our corrected value as well. So this is, it takes into consideration things like demolition costs, how much it's going to cost to transport, handle these materials, because obviously they're not going to be sitting on the floor waiting for you to come and reuse them. There's processes that need to take place in order for that to happen. So I wouldn't say it's an exact science, but it certainly gives you an indication um, of what your materials are worth within the building. Could be useful if you're speaking to clients or if you're a landowner developer to see this information. The last thing that I want to show is how I would go about generating a passport from this. So these are the kind of key KPIs that we have. There are additional ones. Excuse me. There are additional features such as like building process. So if we had tabs infilled at different phases, then we might be able to see the material flow. This is a new building, so we don't have those material flows. We're just getting the new materials. We also have some ESG functionality. So we have CREM reporting as well, some EU taxonomy information. So if you want some more information about the features that I haven't talked about today, we will be doing more of these webinars. So I recommend staying connected to them and keeping up to date on LinkedIn, and signing up to our newsletter as well. And we'll be providing more information. The last thing I want to show today, and we'll open up to some questions if anybody has any, is how to calculate or how to generate a material passport from this. So on the general tab, also I think on the dossier, you'll see this generate report button. So if I generate that report, it gives me a few different options. So I can choose a one-pager, which will essentially try to summarize all this information in one page, give you the key metrics, an executive summary. So I think that's around 5 pages of the key KPIs in slightly more detail. The full passport, which I think is 9 or 10 pages, that has all of this information, a load of graphs, full breakdown of the circularity score metrics, and the same with the carbon or the environmental KPIs you choose. And we can also do a web-based one-pager. So if you wanted to share it online, then you could generate a link that allows you to share it with other people. And a conversation for another day, but useful to understand. We can also infill a RICS carbon assessment at this point as well, because we've calculated it in line with the standard. So for the purpose of this, I want to calculate a full passport. I can go to next, and what happens is it brings up a few different options. So it allows me to choose what I want to include in it. Maybe the detachability information wasn't something I included. It was a bit too much work, so I can remove that. Maybe I don't want the kind of introduction paragraph on what a material passport is, so I could remove that. Do I also want to include a technical annex? So technical annex is a full Excel export of your project with all the environmental information attached. So it allows you to kind of do other things with the data that that's coming out of the Madaster platform. So I want to include that, but maybe I also want to, and I had a specific compliance here, a specific KPI. So I could say I want to do the RICS, and I want the whole life carbon, and I want both the A1 with minus the sequestered carbon. So I could add that in. You can see that it's been added. So when I generate the passport, this information will also be included. So let's go ahead and generate. And similar to when we inputted the file, we got a little notification. And again, we have a little bell here to tell us that it's ready. Come across to the dossier, which is where all of our files are stored. And you can see that I've now got 2 documents. One's still generating, but I've got the Excel that's already appeared down here. So I just can download that. Actually, I'll quickly share that as well. Useful to have a quick look at. So now you can see I've got a full Excel export of the information that we looked at. I've got the individual elements that I've matched to their classification code. Also have all the information in terms of their lifespan, the weight. If I scroll along, I've got renewable information, the secondary information, so the amount of secondary materials that have gone into it, the recycled content, the amount of recoverable. So everything that we looked at just in a really useful Excel full output, and we've got these across all of the different layers, so structure, skin, space plan, sorry. So you can imagine this being quite an extensive document if it was a full building. The last thing I'll show is just that passport that we generated. So I can do the same, I can download the passport. And now if I open it up, you get something like this. So this is just our default passport export with a few extra things added. I took off the little intro, but we've got a bit of a disclaimer. And then as we scroll down, we've got all the information associated with our building. So we've got the general information. We've got source file information, so the quality of our source file, where did the data come from? So the majority of this came from the APEA dataset. And we've got a couple specific manufacturers there as well. So those were the Madaster ID codes I used to connect to those specific manufacturers. We've got materials and details, the mass. I'll just flick through these quickly, but if you'd like to have a copy of this or you want to see an example, then I'm happy to provide one afterwards. So a full breakdown of the materials, a little bit quick there. Our circularity metric breakdown, so it gives a bit of information of how we calculated it. There's also some penalties we apply if there's information not fully known. But again, if you want to have more information on our circularity metric, it's worth checking out our documentation page. Full breakdown of circularity per building layer, and we also have the environmental information, so big carbon, got the GWP, got a by shearing layer as well. And then because I also chose the whole life carbon in line with RICS, I've got the A1, A3 RICS. So it's given me that here, full breakdown of that as well. And lastly, we have the financial information, so our material value. You can see the increase from the current to the net present value.